Adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. Jataka number 127. Kalaṇḍuka-Jātaka. You boast. This story was told by the master once at Jetavana monastery, about a boastful brother. Opening parenthesis. The introductory story and the story of the past in this case are like those of Khuddhaka told above. Closing parenthesis. Kalaṇḍuka was in this case the name of the slave of the treasurer of Benares. And when he had run away and was living in luxury with the daughter of the border merchant, the treasurer missed him and could not discover his whereabouts. So he sent a young pet parrot to search for the runaway. And off flew the parrot in quest of Kalaṇḍuka, and searched for him far and wide, till at last the bird came to the town where he lived. And just at that very time Kalaṇḍuka was enjoying himself on the river with his wife in a boat well stocked with elegant food and with flowers and perfumes. Now the nobles of that land at their water parties make a point of taking milk with a pungent drug to drink, and so escape suffering from cold after their pastime on the water. But when our Kalaṇḍuka tasted this milk, he hawked and spat it out. And in so doing spat on the head of the merchant's daughter. At this moment up flew the parrot, and saw all this from the branch of a fig tree on the bank. Come, come, slave Kalaṇḍuka, cried the bird. Remember who and what you are, and don't spit on the head of this young gentlewoman. Know your place, fellow. So saying, he uttered the following stanza. You boast your high descent, your high degree. With lying tongue. Though but a bird, I know the truth. You'll soon be caught, you runaway. Contempt not the milk then, slave Kalaṇḍuka. Recognizing the parrot, Kalaṇḍuka grew afraid of being exposed, and exclaimed, Ah! Good master, when did you arrive? Thought the parrot, it is not friendliness, but a wish to wring my neck, that prompts this kindly interest. So he replied that he did not stand in need of Kalaṇḍuka's services, and flew off to Benares, where he told the Lord Treasurer everything he had seen. The rascal! Cried the treasurer, and ordered Kalaṇḍuka to be hauled back to Benares where he had once more to put up with a slave's treatment. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, This brother was Kalaṇḍuka in the story, and I the treasurer of Benares. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. Jataka number 128. Biḻāra-Jātaka. Where saintliness. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about a hypocrite. When the brother's hypocrisy was reported to him, the master said, This is not the first time he has shown himself a hypocrite. He was just the same in times gone by. So saying he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva was born rat, perfect in wisdom, and as big as a young boar. He had his living in the forest and many hundreds of other rats owned his sway. Now there was a wandering jackal who saw this troop of rats and fell to scheming how to deceive and eat them. And he took up his stand near their home with his face to the sun, snuffing up the wind, and standing on one leg. Seeing this went out on his road in quest of food, the bodhisattva conceived the jackal to be a saintly being, and went up and asked his name. Godly is my name, said the jackal. Why do you stand only on one leg? Because if I stood on all four at once, the earth could not bear my weight. That is why I stand on one leg only. And why do you keep your mouth open? To take the air. I live on air. It is my only food. And why do you face the sun? To worship him. What uprightness! Thought the bodhisattva, and from then he made a point of going, attended by the other rats, to pay his respects morning and evening to the saintly jackal. And when the rats were leaving, the jackal seized and devoured the last one of them, wiped his lips, and looked as though nothing had happened. In consequence of this the rats grew fewer and fewer. till they noticed the gaps in their ranks, and wondering why this was so, asked the bodhisattva the reason. He could not make it out, but suspecting the jackal, resolved to put him to the test. So next day he let the other rats go out first and himself brought up the rear. The jackal made a spring on the bodhisattva who, seeing him coming, faced round and cried, "So this is your saintliness, you hypocrite and rascal." And he repeated the following stanza. Where saintliness is but a cloak, by which to deceit simple folk, and screen a villain's treachery, the cat-like nature there we see. So saying, the king of the rats sprang at the jackal's throat and bit his windpipe apart just under the jaw, so that he died. Back trooped the other rats and gobbled up the body of the jackal with a crunch, crunch, crunch. That is to say, the foremost of them did, for they say there was none left for the last corners. And ever after the rats lived happily in peace and quiet. His lesson ended, the master made the connection by saying, "This hypocritical brother was the jackal of those days, and I the king of the rats." Source: adapted from archaic translation by Robert Chalmers. Jataka number 129. Aggika-Jātaka. It was greed. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about another hypocrite. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva was king of the rats and lived in the forest. Now a fire broke out in the forest, and a jackal who could not run away put his head against a tree and let the flames sweep by him. The fire singed the hair off his body everywhere, and left him perfectly bald, except for a tuft like a scalp knot where the crown of his head was pressed against the tree. Drinking one day in a rocky pool, he caught sight of this top knot reflected in the water. "At last I've got money to go to market," thought he. Coming in the course of his wanderings in the forest to the rat's cave, he said to himself, "I'll hoodwink those rats and devour them." And with this intent he took up his stand hard by, just as in the previously mentioned story. On his way out in quest of food, the bodhisattva observed the jackal and, crediting the beast with virtue and goodness, came to him and asked what his name was. "Bharadvaja, devotee of the fire god." "Why have you come here?" "In order to guard you and yours." "What will you do to guard us?" "I know how to count on my fingers, and will count your numbers both morning and evening, so as to be sure that as many came home at night, as went out in the morning. That's how I'll guard you. Then stay, uncle, and watch over us." And accordingly, as the rats were starting in the morning he set about counting them 1, 2, 3. And so again when they came back at night. And every time he counted them, he seized and ate the last one. Everything came to pass as in the previously mentioned story. Except that here the king of the rats turned and said to the jackal, "It is not sanctity, bharadvaja, devotee of the fire god, but gluttony that has decorated your crown with that top knot." So saying, he uttered this stanza. It was greed, not virtue, provided you this crest. Our dwindling numbers fail to work out right. We've had enough, fire devotee, of you. His lesson ended, the master identified the birth by saying, "This brother was the jackal of those days, and I the king of the rats." Footnotes: Bharadvaja was the name of a clan of Brahmin priests, to whom the 6th book of the Rig Veda is ascribed.